Today, we're diving into the 2016 film The Duelist. Set during the Russian Empire in the 19th century, the story follows a mysterious man who makes a living in the deadliest way imaginable. He fights pistol duels on behalf of other people, risking his life every single time for money. Just how dark does this story get? Let's find out. The story begins in 1860 in St. Petersburg, Russia. We open with a pistol duel between two noblemen, each determined to defend his honor. Two pistols are placed before them, but only one is loaded. The first nobleman steps forward and confidently chooses his weapon. Smirking, he says that a fortune teller once predicted he could never be killed by a bullet. But he picked the wrong pistol. Fear instantly spreads across his face as he realizes his mistake. One gunshot later, he's dead.
Раз.
Our story then shifts to the man who survived the duel, a mysterious nobleman named Yakovlev. We'll simply call him Yakov. Before we continue, here's a little background. During the Russian Empire, honor meant everything. Even the smallest insult could end in a deadly duel, just like the one we just witnessed. At the time, dueling was legally recognized among the nobility. However, not every nobleman had the courage to risk his own life. Those who lacked the nerve could hire a professional duelist to fight in their place. That's exactly what Yakov does. He's a professional gunman who earns money by defending other people's honor. Of course, Yakov doesn't work alone. Every job he takes is arranged by a middleman named Baron, a German businessman who acts as both Yakov's manager and the connection between him and wealthy aristocrats looking to settle their disputes. But Yakov isn't motivated by money alone. From every payment he receives, he secretly sets aside a portion for one goal he's been chasing for years, a goal he has never revealed to anyone. At the Imperial Administrative Office, Yakov files a petition to restore the reputation of a disgraced nobleman named Kolichev, whom we'll simply call Koli. Koli had been falsely accused, stripped of his noble title, and exiled to a remote island. The government official tells Yakov that Koli is officially listed as dead, making it impossible to process the request. But Yakov refuses to give up. He even offers the official a bribe of 100,000 rubles if Koli's noble status can somehow be restored. To earn that enormous amount of money, Yakov continues accepting one dangerous duel after another through Baron. And whenever he isn't fighting duels, he finds other ways to make money that are just as impressive. Yakov's shooting skills are nothing short of extraordinary. Every bullet lands exactly where he intends, even in situations that seem almost impossible. That's why no one has ever managed to defeat him in a duel.
Пуля даст два рикошета. В финале, господа, пуля ударит рыцаря в грудь.
One day, at a lavish charity auction attended by some of the richest and most powerful nobles in the city, a woman begins auctioning off items to raise money for orphanages and other charitable institutions. The bidding starts, but the room remains completely silent. No one is willing to make the first offer. Then, without warning, a nobleman named Beklemishev suddenly breaks the silence. He shocks everyone by offering 10,000 rubles for nothing more than a simple bouquet of flowers. Despite acting like he was incredibly wealthy, Beklemishev was actually drowning in debt. Most of what he owed belonged to a ruthless nobleman named Baysargin, who threatened to settle the matter with a pistol duel if Beklemishev didn't repay every last ruble. Not long afterward, a small incident changes everything. An elderly one-armed nobleman accidentally bumps into Baysargin and immediately apologizes over and over again. But instead of accepting the apology, Baysargin publicly humiliates the old man in front of everyone. Unable to tolerate such an insult, the old nobleman challenges Baysargin to a duel to defend his honor. At first, Baysargin refuses. He has no interest in fighting an elderly man, especially one with only one arm. That's when Yakov suddenly steps in. He volunteers to fight in the old man's place. The duel is held inside an abandoned warehouse. The rules are unusual. Yakov and Baysargin stand on opposite sides of a thin Japanese paper wall and must shoot without seeing each other. Using the reflection of the sunlight to pinpoint his opponent's position, Yakov narrowly avoids Baysargin's shot. Then he fires. One perfectly aimed bullet is all it takes. Baysargin becomes the second man to die at Yakov's hands. Once the duel is over, the truth finally comes out. The entire event had been carefully planned from the very beginning. A wealthy client had secretly wanted Baysargin dead and paid Baron to arrange everything. Even the one-armed old man had been hired to provoke Baysargin into accepting the duel. On the way home, Baron suddenly notices that Yakov has been shot. Surprisingly, Yakov doesn't show the slightest sign of pain. While treating his wound, the doctor is stunned. It's almost as if Yakov can no longer feel pain at all. That's when Yakov finally reveals the story of his past. Years earlier, he had washed ashore on a remote island, barely alive. Members of a local tribe discovered him with countless whip scars covering his back. Feeling sorry for him, the tribe's shaman performed a sacred healing ritual by immersing him in what they believed was a holy pool. Ever since that day, Yakov has seemed almost immune to pain. It's a gift that has helped him survive every duel he's ever fought. While he was still recovering, a band of raiders attacked the village. They looted everything they could find, including a gold-framed photograph that Yakov always carried with him. Even though he was still weak, Yakov forced himself to stand and fight. Against all odds, he defeated the raiders and managed to recover the photograph. Back in the present, just as the bullet is finally removed from Yakov's body, Imperial soldiers suddenly arrive and arrest him. He's brought before a military tribunal, where he's accused of abusing his noble status to lure government officials into deadly duels. The accusation is actually true, but Yakov calmly pretends it's all a ridiculous lie. Claiming that his honor has been insulted, he challenges anyone in the room to settle the matter with a duel. For a moment, the entire courtroom falls silent. Then, out of all the soldiers present, one officer finally steps forward, accepting Yakov's challenge. The duel follows a brutal game of chance. The two men take turns pointing a pistol at their own heads. Only one bullet has been loaded into the weapon, and neither of them knows when it will fire. As always, Yakov remains calm, showing almost no emotion. His nerves of steel are enough to break his opponent's resolve, and before the game can reach its deadly conclusion, the officer gives up. With that, the military council clears Yakov of all charges and restores his honor. But the story doesn't end there. Later that day, the same officer stops Yakov's carriage and demands to know who he really is. The reason is simple. The officer is the real Yakov's older brother. He knows exactly what his younger brother looked like, and the man standing before him is clearly someone else. That's when the truth is finally revealed. The man we've been calling Yakov is actually Kolichev, or simply Koli. He's the nobleman who was framed, stripped of his title, and sentenced to exile on a remote island as a military prisoner. The name Yakov isn't his at all. After being stranded on the island, Koli stole the identity of another man who had died there. He never imagined that one day he would come face to face with the real Yakov's older brother. Even after learning that Koli had taken his brother's identity, the officer chooses to keep the secret. After all, Koli was only trying to survive and reclaim the noble status that had been stolen from him. Besides, his real brother was already dead. Reporting Koli wouldn't bring him back. That night, Koli secretly meets with Baron to uncover the identity of the mysterious client who has been hiring them all this time. At first, Baron refuses to talk, but eventually he gives in. The man behind every assignment is none other than Beklemishev, the nobleman drowning in debt. As it turns out, Beklemishev is far more dangerous than he appears. He's actually a member of the Imperial Council and has been using Baron and Koli as legal assassins. By arranging official duels, he eliminates his political rivals without ever breaking the law. The most ironic part? The money funding this entire operation was borrowed from the very people he intended to kill, including Baysargin and the nobleman from the opening scene. Thanks to Baron, Koli also uncovers Beklemishev's biggest plan yet. He's preparing to marry a young noblewoman named Martha Tuchkova, the heiress to the wealthiest aristocratic family in the city. If the marriage goes through, Beklemishev will erase all of his debts overnight while gaining enormous wealth and political influence. There's just one problem. Martha's older brother, whom we'll simply call the prince, has already seen through Beklemishev's true intentions. He strongly opposes the relationship and refuses to let his sister marry him. So Beklemishev decides the prince has to disappear. The plan is simple. Baron will lure the prince into a high-stakes card game. Once the prince loses and refuses to pay the debt, Baron will challenge him to a duel. And the man who will actually fight is Koli, a duel that everyone expects Koli to win. After the trap is set, Koli heads to his favorite gun shop to buy a new pistol. Much like John Wick, who's recognized everywhere he goes, Koli has become a legend among the city's gunsmiths. The shopkeepers know him by name and are even eager to recommend the latest firearms they think he'll like. But the moment Koli steps outside, he's stopped by Princess Martha herself. She has only one request: cancel the duel. Princess Martha knows her brother, the prince, has never even held a gun before. But Koli isn't the kind of man who changes his mind just because someone begs him, so he refuses her request. The The duel takes place inside an abandoned building. Just before it begins, the prince stumbles to the ground. One of Beklemishev's hired thugs quietly approaches him and whispers a terrifying warning. If he wants Martha to stay alive, he has to die. Caught between Coley and the assassin, the prince has no way out. His situation is completely hopeless. But at the very last second, Coley deliberately misses his shot. The bullet ricochets off a nearby surface and strikes the hidden thug instead. The assassin dies instantly. Beklemishev suddenly appears. Furious, he warns Coley to stop interfering with his plans unless he wants his true identity exposed to everyone. At this point, the film flashes back to reveal the real history between Coley and Beklemishev. Years earlier, both men had served as high-ranking officers in the Imperial Army. Back then, Coley openly criticized Beklemishev's obsession with settling every dispute through public duels. Humiliated by the criticism, Beklemishev took it personally. But instead of challenging Coley to an honorable duel, he chose the coward's path. He framed Coley for crimes he never committed. As a result, Coley lost his noble title, his family's reputation was destroyed, and he was sentenced to 1,000 lashes before being exiled to a remote island. Now Beklemishev realizes the truth. Coley has returned for revenge. And more importantly, he wants his stolen honor back. So Beklemishev once again resorts to dirty tricks. Forcing Baron to help him, he hires 3 assassins to ambush Coley while he's traveling with the prince and Princess Martha. Things don't go according to plan. When the attackers strike, the prince tries to protect Coley, and is killed in the process. Coley is dragged to the side of the road, where the assassins prepare to execute him. But even outnumbered, Coley manages to fight back and defeat every one of them. Watching from a distance, Beklemishev realizes his plan has failed. To buy himself enough time to escape, he shoots Baron, silencing the only man who could expose him. The next morning, Princess Martha stands beside her brother's body, devastated by his death. Knowing Beklemishev was responsible for everything, she begs Coley to make sure he never hurts anyone again. For Coley, there's only one way to settle the score: a duel. The problem is, only noblemen are allowed to issue a formal challenge. Beklemishev already knows Coley lost his noble status years ago, so he can simply refuse. Desperate, Coley returns to the Imperial Administration Office, hoping his appeal and the enormous bribe he offered earlier will finally be accepted. But Beklemishev has already made his move. He bribed the Attorney General first, ensuring Coley's request would be rejected. Enraged and left with no legal options, Coley storms into a lavish gathering filled with the Empire's most powerful nobles, and publicly challenges Beklemishev to settle everything in a final duel. But Beklemishev still refuses the challenge, insisting that Coley isn't of noble rank and therefore isn't worthy of facing him in a duel. That's when the officer steps forward. He publicly declares that he recognizes Coley as Yakovlev, his own younger brother who was believed to have died on the remote island. To protect his family's honor, the officer officially vouches for Coley's identity. Then Princess Martha confirms the same story. With both of them backing Coley in front of the entire imperial court, Beklemishev suddenly finds himself trapped. He has no excuse left. Reluctantly, he accepts the duel. Before a crowd of nobles, the two men finally face each other. The rules are simple: one shot, one chance. Despite trying to hide it, Beklemishev is visibly nervous. Unlike Coley, he's never been an exceptional marksman. It doesn't take long. Coley fires first, and the bullet ends Beklemishev's life once and for all. The duel is finally over. Moments later, Princess Martha is shocked to discover that Coley was also shot in the chest. But the bullet never pierced his body. It was stopped by the gold-framed portrait of his mother, reinforced with a mixture of gold and steel that he had been carrying all along. With Beklemishev dead, Coley is finally free. By marrying Princess Martha, he can reclaim the noble status that was stolen from him years ago. And that's where the movie ends.